There's a couple verses I want to share that I think will encourage you that God may be speaking to you and to us a lot more than we realize. And I want to give the scriptures that back that up. But the idea is that God does speak in similitudes, is the word that's used in the King James, but parables and like enigmas is a word in the Bible that's used of a way that he speaks. So he doesn't necessarily always talk to you in direct words, but he might show you a picture, a vision. He might show you things in nature, like he used the fig tree to teach the disciples. So I want to give you some verses because it has encouraged me, and I think that it's encouraging to understand that God can speak, and often I would say speaks in visions. So the thing that brought this to my mind is I was reading the King James translation of 1 Samuel 3:1, and it's when Samuel is a child, and it's when the word of the Lord comes to Samuel and he calls Samuel, and Samuel's still under Eli's training or teaching. So it says in the King James, this is what made me think of it: the word of the Lord was precious in those days, there was no open vision. That's 1 Samuel 3:1. And I never read it. The New King James says there was no revelation, which just kind of is a nondescript word, but when you hear open vision, you think of like visually seeing something. So is what made me think about, sometimes we get pictures that come into our mind, or we see things visually with what's around us, and those could be not just thoughts that come through your head, but they could actually be the Lord speaking to you if you'll slow down and go, Lord, is this you speaking to me? Because that is a way he speaks. And actually in the Bible, I can't think of the reference, but it says how somewhere in the Old Testament it talks about how seers is now called a prophet. So it has to do with seeing visually, not just hearing. So the verses, so that was what kind of opened my mind to that, is like, oh, there's no open vision. It says the word of the Lord was precious in those days. So the word is connected to open vision in that verse, 1 Samuel 3:1. So then you start to realize, like, maybe the Lord is speaking to me a lot more than I realize when I get little flashes of pictures in my head. You need to take it to the Lord yourself and be like, Lord, is this from you? But start trusting that that's the way he speaks to you. So I want to give you about 4 verses that also confirm that the Lord does speak through visual pictures in our mind, things we see, and then also dreams, of course, and actual visions, which I've never experienced. Like, I've heard people, where they actually, kind of like John in Revelation, where they're get caught up in the spirit with the Lord. I've never experienced that. I've definitely had pictures come into my head, and I have started to try to trust the Lord with those and go, okay, I just believe that that's something you're giving me, so I'm just going to roll with it, kind of like a trusting, like Proverbs 3:5-6 says, lean not on your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him and he will make straight your paths. And before that says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. So you don't have to necessarily understand what you're seeing. You can just go, okay, Lord, like, I believe that's from you and I'll take it. So the verses that kind of talk about how God can speak through visual pictures and things like that is Hosea 12:10. It says, I have spoken by the prophets and have multiplied visions. I have given symbols through the witness of the prophets. And then it says this stuck out to me a while ago. It says in the beginning of Proverbs, which we all read Proverbs for wisdom and for understanding the Lord and for words from him. It says, this is Proverbs 1, the first chapter, verse 6 and 7 especially. It says, or 5, it says 5, 6, and 7. A wise man will hear and increase learning. A man of understanding will attain wise counsel. To understand a proverb and an enigma, that's where it talks about an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. You'd be like, why, sometimes you're like, God, like, why don't you just tell me? And it's like, it talks about how it's a king's honor to search a thing out. I can't think of where that verse is, and I think it's in Proverbs. But basically, sometimes God is going to talk to you in a riddle. That's between you and him. But I'm just saying, he may not make it super clear, and you can trust him that, hey, like, you'll give me the understanding. The disciples had to be explained some of the parables. They were like riddles. So don't, just because it's a riddle and unclear doesn't mean it's not from the Lord. But the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So that's in Proverbs, talking about how understanding proverbs, enigmas, the words of the wise and their riddles. And then in Job 33:15 and 16, this is the one that talks about how God speaks to man in dreams and visions. It says, in a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, when slumber while slumbering on their beds, he opens the ears of men and seals their instructions in order to turn man from his deeds and conceal pride from man. He keeps back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. So dreams and things can be one of the ways that the Lord gives us warnings or instructs us. Think about how many times when Joseph and Mary had Jesus, Joseph gets talked to, like, if I remember, like 3 times about dreams, through dreams, like warnings, like don't go back to, or you need to go to Egypt because they're going to try to kill Jesus. You need to, don't go back to this one city. If I remember correctly, he warns through a dream, and he's not going to marry Mary because he thinks she's been unfaithful. And the Lord's like, actually, it's all good. Go ahead and marry her. So like dreams were super used to talk to Joseph, to lead him. And then also the wise men were warned in a dream not to go back to Herod. So that's an example of like God guiding through dreams. And then the last one is, once Jesus is on the earth, we all know he talked a lot in parables, and that actually fulfilled a prophecy, which is Psalm 78:2. You can look that up, but it says basically, all these things Jesus spoke to the multitudes in parables, and without a parable he did not speak to them, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, saying, I will open my mouth in parables, I will utter things kept secret from the foundation of the world. So it says, then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into the house, and his disciples came to him saying, explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. So that's an example. And then he went and explained it to them, but he was speaking in parables. So if you get pictures in your mind, maybe just take them to the Lord and go, is this from you? Could you explain it to me? If you're getting dreams, say, Lord, could you explain these to me? And if you're not getting pictures in your mind and not getting dreams, then ask the Lord. It talks about the lamp. I think it's in Matthew 6, the lamp of the body is the eye. If the eye is good, the whole body is good. So maybe say, Lord, cleanse my lamp. Help me to start to see with spiritual eyes. And that's something that I pray, and I know he will be faithful to do that. But I just want to encourage you that all of these verses were to encourage you that God may be speaking to you way more than you realize, and you might be dismissing it and not understanding that he does speak through riddles. He does speak through similitudes. He does speak through things that you don't just understand right from the beginning. He doesn't just tell you, go buy this field, or, take this job. He might be showing you things, and you need Holy Spirit to give you discernment. So be encouraged. You can look those verses up, and sometimes it's helpful to read them in different translations. That's what kind of opened my eyes with Samuel, is that it said, again, there was no open vision. It's like nobody could see anything. So if you start to get pictures, start to don't just brush them away. Think, okay, what are you showing me, Lord? These thoughts that are coming into my mind, is that you talking to me? And start to trust him that he is talking to you, because I believe he is. And I know that it's been the times I have trusted him with things and things that he's putting in my heart, or impressions or pictures or dreams or whatever. A lot of times it's just an impression, I would say, but it's always been really fulfilling. Because last thing, I was looking at this, but if you look at the Nathaniel, when he gets called, I think it's in the Gospels, I can't remember, he talks about Jesus. I got this from The Chosen, but Jesus is said, I saw you under the fig tree. And that is the thing that convinced Nathaniel that he was the Messiah. It's oh my gosh, you're the Messiah. And then right after that, it's the woman at the well. And when you look at her, she's talking with Jesus, and then she starts to tell people, this man told me everything I did. So there's something about the fact that Jesus knows you personally that makes you really believe oh, this is God. I am interacting. The Holy Spirit is God. He knows me. He knows my situations. So just start to trust him as he talks to you and he reveals things to you. I hope it encourages you.